From wherever you're joining us today, welcome to worship with Scottsboro Cumberland Presbyterian Church. It is a joy to have you. This morning, we're opening the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, and we're looking at some old prophecies, some popular prophecies. We're looking at them in a different way. Here now we're reading from Isaiah chapter 40, verses 21 to 31. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Was it not told to you from the first? Have you not grasped how the earth was founded? He is enthroned on the rim of the earth, and its dwellers are like grasshoppers. He spreads out the heaven like gauze and stretches them like a tent to dwell in. He turns princes into nothing. Earth's rulers he makes as naught. Hardly planted, hardly sown, hardly their stem rooted in the earth. When he blows on them, they wither, and the storm bears them off like chaff. And to whom would you liken me, that I be compared, says the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these. He who musters their host by number, and all of them calls by name, through abundant strength and mighty power, no one lacks in the ranks. Why should you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel? My way is hidden from the Lord. My cause is ignored by my God. Do you not know? Have you not heard? An eternal God is the Lord, creator of the ends of the earth. He does not tire, is not weary. His discernment cannot be fathomed. He gives vigor to the weary and great power to those sapped of strength. Lads may grow weary and tire, and young men badly stumble. But who wait for the Lord shall renew their vigor, shall grow new wings like the eagles, shall run and shall not tire, walk on and not be weary. Friends, this is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. If the 40th chapter of Isaiah was not inspired by God, I would tell you that it's sloppy. The language isn't. The language is powerful, it's compelling, but the arrangement feels dysfunctional. The prophecy starts at the beginning of chapter 40 with no introduction. Comfort, oh comfort my people, says your God. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem and call out to her, for her term of service is ended. The sentence, for her crime is complete, her crime is atoned for. The God of Israel calls on all of creation to comfort his people. God calls out to the heavens and the earth and the seas, even to the nation that is oppressing Israel. Comfort my people, their punishment is over. God's going to stop heaping punishment upon consequence. He has forgiven Israel. Which, let me point out, Israel has not repented. There has been no day of mourning, no temple sacrifices. Yom Kippur has not occurred. No, God has chosen of his own volition, not in response to some act. God has chosen to forgive them. Let's be clear, gods don't do this. Gods demand justice. Gods demand payment. They demand what they deserve. They demand things be made right. But our God, here in chapter 40, begins with forgiveness. And not just forgiveness. With no transition, this prophecy continues. A voice calls out in the wilderness, clear a way for the Lord's road, level in the desert, a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted high, and every mountain brought low, and the jagged places made straight, and the ridges become a valley. Another thing that gods do not do, Israel's God is going to step down off his holy mountain in Jerusalem. He will leave his temple and carve out a highway through the desert. Gods don't leave their temples, but our God does. To work. The land between Jerusalem, Israel's home, and Babylon, where they are in captivity, this land is cracked and jagged. Mountains leap, and then they plunge into valley depths, and the roads were twisting and deadly. And God, the exalted one, the Holy One, the King of Kings, walks out of the temple in his flowing robes of white, rolls up those long sleeves, and gets dirty building a highway, lifting high the valleys and bringing low mountains and making straight the jagged places. He carves this highway through impassable terrain because he's leading his people home. So he leaves his temple, he leaves his glory, and carves himself a path to his broken people so he can lead them home. You can take that idea and it flows perfectly into the end of our passage. Do you not know? Have you not heard? An eternal God is the Lord, creator of the ends of the earth. He does not tire, is not weary. Why does it say that? Does not tire, is not weary? Because our God is not hiding in his temple. Shockingly, he's left it behind and is out here working in the desert, robes of glistening white covered in dust, jackhammers and dynamite to carve a highway through the wilderness. A God leaving the temple, leaving his glory and humbling himself to carve a path through the wilderness to rescue his people, a 900-mile road home. 900 miles that will be traveled by children, by the injured, by the elderly. 900 miles. So it makes sense that the end of our passage continues. Lads may grow weary and tire, and young men badly stumble. Yes, I would say so. Anyone would be exhausted by 900 miles of twisting roads and switchbacks, climbing up cliffs and shoving through valleys, soaring mountains. But who wait for the Lord shall renew vigor, shall grow wings like eagles, shall run and shall not tire, walk and not be weary. The beginning of Isaiah 40 flows so beautifully into the end, this image of a God carving a highway for his people to come home, a highway that remains difficult, but he will give them the energy. Even those with bad hips and bad hearts, weak lungs and injured limbs. It's an incredible image. And the middle of Isaiah 40 completely ruins it. It ruins it. Because between verses 5, where we left off, and verse 28, where we picked back up, is 23 verses of other stuff. 23 verses of how awesome God is and how insignificant everyone else is. 23 verses, and these are beautiful images. But they're images that don't fit with this building a highway and coming home and sustaining the weak. If the 40th chapter of Isaiah was not inspired by God, I would tell you that it's sloppy. I'd say the author got distracted. He got hungry and got up to make a sandwich and he forgot where he left off, and it feels confused. It's sloppy. So either the prophet Isaiah got distracted, and we just have to forgive him for that, or there's a reason for God's interlude. So let me ask this question. Let's say tomorrow, God sends out an email to every pastor, to your pastor, that he is starting a new kingdom effective immediately, and let's say it's in Toronto, Canada, which for us in Scottsboro is about 900 miles away. If God sends this message that he's starting this new kingdom and he's going to pave the way, just stay on I-65 north, keep going north, God will take care of the immigration paperwork. God will take care of the gas and food. God will make sure we're safe. God will make sure we do not tire. We will walk and will not be weary. All we have to do is get there. If God sends that message, what do we say? I'll tell you what I would say. I would say I have a job in Scottsboro. I have friends in Scottsboro. My kid is in school in Scottsboro. I have a mortgage in Scottsboro. I'm doing good work in Scottsboro. Kingdom building work in Scottsboro. I'm being faithful. I'm reading my Bible. I'm praying. I'm serving my neighbor. I'm doing all of that in Scottsboro. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So yeah, the new kingdom sounds pretty cool. And I hope that goes well. Good luck with that. But I think I'm going to stay here. Wouldn't you? It takes effort just to uproot, to move across town, much less to a different state, a different country 900 miles away. And the better your life is wherever you are, the more effort it takes to uproot. Would you take the journey? Our family has been reading Shel Silverstein's poems recently because they're fun, and our third grader is learning to read, and they're a way that we can do that and laugh together. And he's got one titled Anchor. And it goes, "Our anchor's too big for our ship. So we're sitting here trying to think, if we leave it behind, we'll be lost. If we haul it on board, we will sink. If we sit and keep talking about it, it will soon be too late for our trip. It sure can be rough on a sailor when the anchor's too big for the ship." It sure can be rough on a sailor when the anchor's too big for the ship. Why is there this perplexing interlude about God's greatness and the insignificance of humans and the passing nature of fame right in the middle of God's offer to bring Israel home from captivity? Why is it here? Because lots of God's people don't want to go. Their anchor is too big for their ship. They've been in exile. They've been in captivity in Babylon now for years. A generation has been born there, grown up, had kids there. And suddenly God appears and says, guess what? I'm making you a road home. Let's pack up. It's time to go home. And the kids, who are now adults with their own kids, say, God, that sounds so great. But we are home. The kids speak Babylonian. The family has finally broken into a friend group, and they got the kids into this good school, and you're going to pull them out in the middle of a school year? They were just getting settled, and you're on track for a promotion, and you just refinanced the house. And when God says, I'm coming for you, I'm making a highway through the desert to bring you home, your punishment is over. This generation is looking at one another saying, punishment? What punishment? This is our home. These are our people. If God said he's starting a new kingdom, he's bringing you home. And all you have to do is pack up all your things, pull the kids out of school, switch your bank, sell your house, make a 900-mile journey on foot, over jagged cliffs, under a blazing sun, to find a new house, buy it or build it yourself, new job, new friends, enroll the kids in a new school, start everything over. But don't worry. Even though lads may grow weary and tired, and young men badly stumble, those who wait in the desert for the Lord will renew their vigor. Who's taking that trip? I mean, really, who's taking that trip? I'm not worried if God is going to sustain me through the desert. That's not the problem. The problem is the desert. And even more than that, the problem is leaving. Why would I choose to follow God 900 miles through the desert, twisting roads, and what at the end of it all? What is there when I can stay right here and have the life I have now? Which is why this verse at the end of Isaiah 40 is often plucked out of its context to mean something totally different than it intends to say. The King James has it, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. And that's a prayer at sports games. They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength and shall mount up with wings as eagles. It's the fourth quarter, it's the third period, but we will not be weary. God sustains us. Let's go. You can put in double and triple overtime. You can pull in all-nighter studying for finals because Isaiah 40. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. We are the faithful, and God will sustain us. We want this verse to mean that God will sustain us as we pour effort into our existing life. We want it to mean that God will elevate us in the way of life we choose. We want it to mean that God is going to help us achieve worldly success and to win trophies and promotions and to overcome whatever obstacles there are as we pursue our goals. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. But what if it means, as you abandon the life you had, as you set aside the success you've earned, as you leave behind your comfort and certainty and follow God 900 miles through the desert, you will grow new wings and soar like eagles? Or for us, on the other side of Jesus, what if it's something like as you lay down your nets and your old way of life and you pick up your cross to follow my Son, you will run and not be weary. You will walk and not faint. It's powerful. There's no denying that. It's powerful. The problem is, sometimes when God calls, our anchor is too big for our ship. Jesus might have carved out a highway to heaven, but right here is still pretty darn good. There is this statistical truth that as societies become more affluent, religiosity decreases. As a society becomes more affluent, as it has more resources, more money, more stability, religiosity decreases, which isn't necessarily just belief in God, but the frequency, the intensity of that belief. And this trend is pretty universal. And the way many atheists will read this is that as people become more educated, they become less superstitious, and so they believe in God less, but that's not the trend. As society becomes more affluent, religiosity decreases. That's because as God offering us a new home in the sky is not as tempting if you've got a nice home on earth. Because if your life isn't broken, it's harder to follow God to the cross. It's because if it feels like your life is pretty abundant, it's harder to follow Jesus into a tomb. It's hard to follow God through the desert if your life feels like a promised land. It's hard to choose to follow God through the desert if your life already feels like a promised land. Following God into newness of life is hard. Following God into newness of life is hard if our life is easy. Because nobody wants to give up the promised land to follow God 900 miles through the desert to something. And yet this is exactly what God calls us to do. So what do you do when your anchor is too big? If you want to follow God, what do you do if your anchor is too big? If you have a good life, if God has blessed you, if you have received what you have earned, if you have this success, this stability, if you've made it, what do you do when God calls you and your anchor is too big? One option is you wait until tragedy strikes. When life hits, when you're uprooted and thrown sideways, it is more obvious the ways we need God. When tragedy strikes and things fall apart, we can see with different clarity that the things of this earth are in fact passing away, and there is only one rock on which to build our foundation. We can wait until tragedy strikes and then try and do this work and reorient ourselves around God, and that can work. That's important to do. But if you don't just want to wait, we think the other option is to build a bigger boat. If your anchor is too big for your boat, if your life is too stable, too comfortable, too delightful, if you're too blessed to want to follow God into the difficulty that is ahead of us, another option is to build a bigger boat. This interlude that God lays out in the middle of Isaiah 40, it's about God's grandness and the smallness of human beings in comparison. And God says human beings are like the dust that's on scales after you remove whatever you're weighing. And God says kings and princes, they're like a plant that it's barely been planted. It doesn't even have roots down yet. And God is the one who stretched out the heavens like gauze. There is a grandness to God's story, a largeness to God's project. And when we enter into it, when we walk into the world, if our boat is this big, if I'm about saving myself, if I'm about my comfort or my daughter's comfort or my family and we're making it, and this is the size of my boat, well, my anchor may very well be too big. But if we open our eyes, if we look further to God's other children, to those around us in deep need, if we turn our eyes to our flooded hospitals, if we look for those who are alone or who are searching in life, who are uncertain about what tomorrow will bring, whose prospects are dark, if we expand our horizon, if we build a bigger boat, then perhaps it will be compelling. The God who has carved a highway through the desert, not just for you or for me, but for all of those around us, who is calling all his children home. And as we pursue him, as inadequate as we may feel, the Lord promises to renew our vigor. That if we step out as unequipped as we may be, we will grow new wings like eagles. Brothers and sisters, if we set aside our comfort, if we build a bigger boat, we shall run and shall not tire, walk and not grow weary, even as we carry our cross into newness of life. Thanks be to God. Amen.